You will now be placed into conference. To mute your line, press *6. To unmute, press #6. After joining the call, to record the conference for those who may miss this call, or for future playback, press *2.
Dyke. Here. Bob Uni. Here. Tom Lampy. Here. John Benson. Here. Bob Von Wolfrat.
Brian Dreiling here for Bob.
Denise Havlick.
Here.
Andy Buffington.
Here.
Ellen Hagan. Deb Craybill. David Ness.
Here.
Jason Leonard.
Here.
Ted Camachis.
Here.
Michael Casper.
Here.
Carol Lynn Smith. Linda Fredrickson.
Here.
Kelly Grosskirth.
Here via phone.
Senator Feenstra. Senator Brace. Representative Kressig. Representative Holt. Craig Allen.
Here.
Helen Taranovich. You have a quorum.
Thank you, ma'am. We'll do the introduction of board members, starting with Jeff.
Jeff Sorensen, Iowa Department of Natural Resources.
John Benson, Iowa Department of Homeland Security and Emergency Management.
Denise Pavlik, SCCC.
Linda Fredrickson, Iowa EMS Association.
Patrick Updike, Iowa Department of Corrections.
Craig Allen, SWIC.
Tom Lampy, DPS.
Jason Leonard, Waverly Police Department.
Mike Casper, Lynn County Sheriff's Office.
Ted Camachis, Sheriff of Marshall County, representing the Iowa State Sheriffs and Deputies.
Andy Buffington with Winnebago and Hancock County, representing communication centers.
Bob Uni, Iowa DOT.
Those of us around the phone, board members.
Kelly Grosskirth, Member at Large, City Manager, Trainer, Iowa.
Dave Ness, Des Moines Police, Municipal.
Okay.
Nikki Benson, Tama County Emergency Management 911.
To our guests, Rick.
Rick Homer with the ICN. Corey Smith, Iowa Department of Public Health.
Ryan Mulhall, ICN.
Phil Bronner, ICN.
Kevin Condon, Iowa Communications Alliance. Dave Duncan, Iowa Communications Alliance.
Curtis Walser, Cedar Rapids Fire, and Iowa Task Force 1. Scott Richardson.
Rhonda McKibben, DPS.
Ben Houghton, Ames.
Story County 911.
Kathleen Warren County 911.
Todd Talbert, Gas County 911.
Tim Lott, Cedar County 911 EMA.
Stephen Rodriguez, Isicsb.
with Motorola. Excuse me. Tim Aaron from Motorola.
Megan Mossgard, Motorola.
Brian Crum, I'm with Kimberly.
Jeff Sundholm, DOT.
Steve Gray, DOT. Blake DeRucci, Iowa Homeland Security Emergency Management, 911 Program Manager.
Curtis Pion, Polk County Sheriff's Office.
Alice Wolf, Center of Legislative Services.
Okay, is that it? Is there any guests on the phone?
Nikki Whitaker, Public Safety.
Jim Lundstedt, DHS, OEC.
Okay, welcome everyone. I'm looking for the approval of the agenda for today. If I could get a motion for that, please? Hey, Jeff?
Second.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, approval of the meeting minutes from June 9th, 2016. Get a motion for that, please?
So moved. Andy Buffington.
Okay, do a second?
Second.
Ted? All in favor?
Aye.
SWIC report, Mr. Allen.
Thank you. Okay, the first thing I want to talk about was the Isicsb system. Kind of a general overview of some of the things that have gone on. Some of the other committees may have additional clarifications that they want to make, but I think the board should know that we did webinars and have completed a couple of those on general information and a couple on technical aspects of how the platform could be used. And I want to recognize John Benson for doing an outstanding job of facilitating that, and his abilities to capture the questions and elegantly get us to the right place is greatly appreciated. The user group committee application process, which I believe Chair Buffington will talk more about, has this meeting scheduled, and we'll be bringing in some representatives from outside Illinois, or outside, including Ohio, Illinois, and Missouri, to help us assess the process that we will be using and make sure that we are truly using a best practice. The platforms being used today, I suspect Chair Lampe will talk about that more, about the National Governors Association, some of the things going on and how it's working out. And we have a DDR scheduled for, I believe, October now, that will be bring us much closer to exactly what the system will look like, how it will work, and what we can expect from it, and how we can expect to use it. Activities on FirstNet, the RICs continue to identify representatives from various agencies across the state and get that information into the CHASM tool. We're developing update presentations for outreach 201 and 301. Those two presentations will help meet the appetite and interest that are coming in from across the state. There's different levels of interest. Some are still trying to figure out, what does FirstNet mean to me and what could I do with it? Others will say, we want to be on FirstNet, how do we get there, and what do we need to do to move to the front of the line? So presentation 201, presentation 301 help them get a better grasp of that. As we get information, because we're waiting for FirstNet to identify who the vendor is that will actually be carrying out the construction and the rollout of the network. So Iowa, and when I go to the SWIC meetings, and I'll defer to the CIO's office of what they're seeing at the CIO meetings, but when I go to the statewide interoperability meetings, Iowa is very well positioned and prepared, and they rarely, in fact, I can't think of a time that they brought something up at one of those council meetings that we didn't already know about and weren't already actively involved in. So in many ways, it's hard to recognize when you're out in front of the pack, but in many ways that's where Iowa finds itself. And I'm sure that Chair of the Broadband Committee, Director Lombard, will have more on that later. Onboard activities, those of you who've heard, we've had a couple of new board members join us, Denise Pavlik from Scott County and Captain Dave Ness from Des Moines. Denise has agreed to chair the Training and Exercise Committee. We're excited about that. Big shoes to fill. Tom Buckman from DPS retired and left us in really good shape with regard to the training committee, and we look forward to seeing the new energy and being able to drive that forward. So we've posted a revised list of the board of the chairs and when they meet, and the times and dates for that. Other issues, I was asked to take a look at the FCC task force on optimal PSAP architecture and provide some insight as to what there might be value from the perspective of interoperability with regard to Iowa. And one of the things that popped off of the report at me was that first, I knew a number of the players that were involved in drafting it, and secondly, they were silent in a lot of areas that needed addressed. Number one was a strategic plan. Number two was any reference to public safety grade and what those standards might be. So P25 is a standard that's out there, but a lot of the infrastructure they talk about in the report, there either aren't standards established or they aren't adopted and accepted. And so I think that, and I was told that there will be another report coming out that will address those more robustly later on in the year. But I think what that says is that there's a very close alignment between what went on in the meeting before this with the E911 Council and what's going on with the Interoperability Board as we move forward. And the purpose and value of a strategic plan is going to be very important to us. And I think we'll see more along those lines, and that will then get dovetailed into the statewide communications interoperability plan, which for many of you who know me know I would rather have it late and right than on time and not right. So we're still struggling with how to get that best framed for the federal government, and more importantly, a strategic plan, so that if any emergency manager, any police chief were to pick it up and read it, it would make some sense to them, and they would see where they fit in it. And we're still trying to get there. That's probably the 100-foot level. I think we would cover the ISSI in another place. So, Chair, I think that's pretty much what I've got for you right now.
Okay, very well.
Any questions?
Okay,
Thank you.
Deputy Swick, is she here? Here in the front? Okay, there she is.
Thank you, Chair Lampe, Board, guests. On the federal level, I've been working on the Public Safety Communications Research User Interface Working Group. And we started in June, and we have weekly meetings every Wednesday. And in 2016, PSCR decided that they would develop a user interface roadmap for public safety. And PSCR is seeking to solicit input from first responders, federal, state, and local government reps, industry leaders, and academia. By leveraging expertise from across a diverse stakeholder base, they can accurately identify where research and development resources will create the greatest impact to the public safety community. And that they've done other roadmaps that are similar to this. So through the SWIC, the NC SWIC group, I was assigned to that working group last month, and it's been it's rocking. The weekly meetings have accelerated capturing stakeholder information regarding user interface technologies, and we also talk about potential gaps to create the UI roadmap. This week we discussed, for example, voice, gesture, and eye control technologies, wearables, and smart interactive GPS. So it's all about forward-thinking things for LTE and FirstNet. So on our FirstNet outreach, we've been working on the WISE pilot, which is Wi-Fi internet for school emergencies. This pilot's been our strong focus this past June, and we'll be going into the summer months. We'll be heading up, I'm going to be heading up the technical liaison duties, while outreach specialist Wagner is going to be talking mainly to the stakeholders and the affiliates. We'll be introducing our WISE pilot FAQ, and we've already sent some out. I think ORS Wagner may have more to report on his outreach time, so I won't talk a lot about that. FirstNet quality of service, priority, and preemption, those documents that the FirstNet Broadband Committee sent out have been circulating in our regional RICs, and they're out there, and we've had a few discussions on our RIC calls. We've got some outreach planning to include QPP in the works of our FirstNet, and that's like a PowerPoint presentation Sean and I are working on. And also the FirstNet Broadband Committee is planning that FEMA Region 7 meeting in August that we've also been discussing among the RIC meetings as well. So there's a lot of discussion going on about QPP. And as far as the RICs go, we have an issue right now with chair vacancies in 3 RICs. So in RICs 3, 5, and 6, the vice chairs have yet to hold votes to get new leaders in as of today. So we made, Swick Allen and I made some effort to go down to RIC 5, and we could not get the leaders were busy, let's put it that way, to meet with us. And so we're going to continue, our plan is to continue the calls and the emails and online tools for RIC outreach and education, which is what they asked for. And then accompany, within our FirstNet outreach meetings that we're planning on doing in the regions this summer on our road trips, we're going to include some RIC outreach in all of those, even the regions that have strong showings. So as we did last summer, we're going to continue that RIC outreach throughout Iowa. Regions 1, 2, and 4 meet regularly, and I believe one of the things, I'm going to give you just what is common in all the regular RIC meetings. One of the requests that I keep hearing is more notice for the next LMR DDR meeting. So if we're having the optimized DDR meeting in October, they would appreciate more than a 2-week notice on a 3-day, if it's a 3-day or long-term meeting. So that was one thing they requested. I heard that multiple times. And then they really want a CHASM webinar. So I'm going to be working with OEC Jeff Lee on a training webinar, because our webinar is more of, we have one that's more about the history, and I don't think that's what they want. They want to know how to use it. So, and we have been working on a CHASM, speaking of which, a CHASM Next Gen presentation for Homeland Security 13th Annual Iowa Homeland Security Conference coming up in October. And we had a June 30th deadline for conference presenter form. We got that in, and a July 8th deadline for bio, picture, and summary of topic due, and that's been done. So September 30th is our presentation deadline, and we already have the presentation basically completed. It just needs to be spit shined. So RIC 1, is Rob Dennert still here? No, his meeting was yesterday, and we had a summer attendance. It's usually attended much stronger. We had about 5 people, and again, that was they brought up what I'd already mentioned. And then RIC 2, one of the themes in RIC 2 was the point of contact map on the website had not been updated since April. So I met with Sean and got, he gave me some training on it, and so I took over the duties of updating that map. And worked with the people in Region 2 and got that updated. So that's been up to date, and I've been talking to several RICs to make sure that that's up to date right now, since I know who's in CHASM and who isn't. And then Region 4's meeting, which is Doug. Doug, are you on the call today? That would be Doug Reed. And Doug Reed, they had mainly talked about the points of contact in CHASM, and we did go over the QPP for quite a while, and we're working on a survey in the constant contact database to use for the QPP feedback from the regional folks, and thought that might be the easiest way to do that. So,
For our new board members in the audience, could you explain QPP?
Quality of service, priority and preemption, and it's similar to, if you know how radios are used today. If you have a talk group, that's an emergency talk group that's mainly used just by first responders, but then you have an all hands on deck, like a tornado, and you want to put public works in there, and maybe you want to even put animal control on there because you need all hands on deck. You actually change people to a different talk group, or you escalate them to, you escalate their priority. And you can do that in the LTE world. There's so many things you can do. You can do it by user. You can do it in so many different ways. It's kind of complicated. So quality of service, priority and preemption are ways, and you can preempt others trying to get to the same tower. If there's limited access, you can preempt, like a firefighter can preempt a public works person. So there's different things you can do, but each state needs to meet with FirstNet, and that's something that FirstNet Broadband Subcommittee's working on. We'll meet with FirstNet, and they're doing it by FEMA region, to determine how we want to do that in our state, or how we want to do that in our region.
That's totally the FirstNet. QPP is totally related to FirstNet at this point, nothing to do with LMR.
Correct.
Okay,
But
just want to
it's-
make that
yeah.
separation, because it is confusing.
But it's the same. So.
But we're not dealing with the QPP on the Isicsb system as of right now. We're dealing with FirstNet on the QPP.
Whatever we determine for the Isicsb system has to overlay with the QPP for FirstNet when it comes. So that the radio device, when it works, and it cross-pollinates from 700 megahertz TDMA to LTE, that framework has to work the same way. So it is important that we understand that it will all become one thing. It's how it all becomes one thing down life's road.
Best practices
So,
would indicate that, yeah.
So the good news is Iowa's out in front of it. We've got the latest, greatest technology with TDMA, 700 megahertz, right? So we're utilizing them. Melvin and his team are laying out the best practices that we have today. As they look at LTE, that will be one of the first things in the TIA world that we participate in about how do you integrate this stuff and make it work elegantly. So the prioritization is really the bottom line, and then what network it's on becomes secondary.
So that's when you're saying that LMR and FirstNet Spectrum are working together on the same network, which is light years away yet?
Yeah, it'll be in the lifetime of people sitting around this table. It probably won't be in my lifetime, but it'll be in a lifetime sitting around this table.
I understand, so what I'm trying to get clear here is we're not talking about it in LMR as of today.
No, we aren't talking about it as of today, but we don't want to lose vision of that.
Gotcha.
Just don't want to lose vision of that. What we do today has an impact, as just like buying equipment has an impact on how things work tomorrow.
Yeah, there's use cases we use to explain it that we find helpful, but I didn't mean to make that confusing and say that's, that's probably why in FirstNet they use the highway analogy and the carpool lane and stuff, so it doesn't confuse it with P25. So.
Okay. Good.
Thank you.
Thank you. I think Stephen's gone. Blake?
Blake DeRucci, Iowa Homeland Security Emergency Management 911 Program Manager, and I'll address some of the council meeting as well before this. Later today or tomorrow, we'll be able to announce the vendor who won the RFP for the consolidation study that we were tasked with House File 2439. It's more of a strategic plan moving forward, looking at, I think everything is on the table with 911. Code changes, how we do 911 in Iowa, and we're looking at a couple different stakeholder engagement meetings throughout Iowa, and looking for broad participation. The Isicsb board will be included in that. You all will be included in that individually in your regions as well. So make sure that when you see those meetings, engage or spread the word, and we want broad participation in that. I don't think we have any preconceived notions of how that report's going to shake out when we're all done with it, but I know there's a lot of interest in the legislature about consolidation, about shared services. So better to be part of that than be told how we're going to look in the future is kind of our sales pitch. One of the things that was discussed in the 911 council meeting today was consolidation grants. Again, kind of the changes to 2439. The old $100,000 grants went away. In its place are $200,000 consolidation grants. Both physical and virtual are to be considered in that. We did a number of webinars to roll out the changes to the program. And in those webinars, we talked about what would be eligible as far as virtual consolidation for radio systems. Radio systems are listed just alongside CAD and CPEs and physical consolidation. So we had to consolidation applications, both kind of on that virtual radio side of things. The other part of this that we discussed about today is within that code change, it also says to PSAPs. What's a PSAP? I can very easily draw the lines. If it's one county that wants to join a regional radio system, that makes sense to me. That's a radio consolidation in a virtual world. What does that mean for a county that wants to join the statewide system? And that was one of the specific consolidation applications that we got. So we're trying to figure out and interpret what that means and how that applies and if that's an eligible expense under the consolidation grant. Luckily, more of a procedural thing, we haven't approved administrative rules yet to update according to House File 2439 when that was signed. So we decided to pump the brakes a little bit on approving those consolidation applications. We're going to gather August 10th prior to the next 911 council meeting and really hammer some of those things out. Hopefully we'll be able to involve that consultant for the consolidation study at the same time and really look strategically at what we want to consider as virtual consolidation. So, like John Benson said earlier, we can debate both sides of the radio consolidation piece. What's one PSAP? What's a regional PSAP? So we're trying to hammer those out and make sure we kind of set the precedent going forward, at least for the rest of the year, and what will be included or not. Any questions? Yes.
Like, since our meeting, it dawned on me that the council had adopted the P25 for the consolidation study at the same time and really look strategically at what.
That's freaky.
Yeah. Got to hear you twice. The council had adopted the expenditure of funds for P25 upgradable equipment to align with the statewide platform, which I guess you could say is sort of judicial acceptance by the council, if you will, of that platform. What would it take for the council to consider that? Because the statewide platform basically creates it's cloud. You don't have to go directly to the next one. You could go 35 miles or 50 or 75 miles away when it's up and running, or even further if you so chose, based on the threat base. So if your threat base is water and you want to get away from that flood, the system offers the ability to go much further away and have your backup, which kind of came up at the end of the meeting out of Potawatomi. What would it take from the board to the council to get that judicial acceptance by, I mean, is it a formal written request? Is it a matter of just having a conversation here? How does that part occur? Then I'm asking that because next comes FirstNet with whatever that looks like when it occurs. And it seems like that sort of aligns with what we already did with regard to the EZNet system that the state built, through state funding, a wide area system that should be used by as many as possible. So what's your thoughts on that? Or do you have thoughts on it?
I would say if the board thinks it would be beneficial for your purposes to write a letter of some sort, one way or the other, I think you're free to do that.
Okay.
Again, we're having that meeting, about 3 weeks from now to talk about and define that virtual consolidation. It's something that we've never experienced either. And I mean, you mentioned it in the FCC TFOPA's report. There's a whole lot of stuff. It's a total paradigm shift that we're going to have to wrap our heads around and see what we want to, quote unquote, open the door to, at least for this year.
Well, I applaud the efforts of Homeland Security. You're trying to look to the end game and not make many steps. You're trying to take a step that gets everyone there with the fewest number of opportunities to buy the wrong equipment that doesn't align, which is a challenge. But as we look at that, that was what crossed my mind about, we've already adopted part of it. Maybe it makes sense to go ahead and adopt it and then have language in the administrative rules broad enough that will allow other statewide, whatever that may be, what if we had a statewide CAD? What if we had a statewide records management system? What if we had a statewide, not that they'd have to use it, but available to them?
And one of the other things I know that at least I've considered as part of that process, should we go ahead and start approving consolidation applications for the state LMR project, is at some point before we pay that out and close that grant, we're going to want some sort of documentation from the board or from somebody that, yes, they are now on the system or made those steps to get onto the system. So we're not spending $200,000 and they can't talk to anyone. Any other questions? Thanks.
Thanks, Blake. Hey, Tim, can we wait to the end of the board meeting for the public comment area?
To his question, that's what I have a question on.
Okay, but just to keep things moving, can that wait, or is it, do you really need to ask him at this point?
Well, I think it needs to be asked at this point.
Okay, you proceed.
And I'm sorry that I want to ask it at this point and not the end, but to your question on a flood, and you're asking if you can move it. One of the first things, lessons learned from the 2008 flood was, the first thing we do is we take dispatching of all the emergency responders to the incident away from the PSAP because they're overwhelmed. They need to do their day-to-day issues. We move dispatching to the EOCs. How's that going to affect the FirstNet and your system when it's not sitting in the EOC?
Well, I'm glad you asked that question because, Tim, all you have to do is hit the network.
Because my EOC might not be there. It might be a mobile.
Think in terms of your phone. It doesn't matter where you go. If you have wireless, all you got to do is hit the network.
Understood.
Okay.
I've had 3 presidential disasters. We lost all cellular. Now how are we going to work? I can only use radio.
Right. So your radio, I'm sorry, maybe I wasn't clear. Your radio acts like your cell phone except on a standalone network. So in a statewide system, you bring your radio, it doesn't matter where you go in the state, it works. So if you take your dispatch center and you move it over to another location, as long as there is access to the network, it doesn't have to go out a wire.
No, I understand.
It goes directly. Okay, so that's the point I was making. So if you have those backup units with you,
okay,
or if you don't, the trailers would have them. The Isicsb trailers, you could bring those in. The point I was making with regard to Blake was Potawatomi was trying to set up a backup that got them out of a particular threat zone.
Okay, I understand that.
That's all I was making with them. So if they wanted to set it up and say they wanted you to do it because you're in a different threat zone, okay, they could do that. And the radio system would allow you to dispatch Potawatomi County cars from your location using a similar shared CAD and some other technology that went along with it. That was the only point I was trying to make.
Okay, I understand.
That makes sense?
I think you missed what I'm saying. I don't move my PSAP unless absolutely. I take that part of dispatching away from the PSAP. I let them continue the day-to-day.
Let's change the threat. Your PSAP burnt down.
Okay.
That's what the backup is there for. You got an immediate threat. It happened.
Right.
You got to get out of there now. They didn't flip the switch. You just suck the information over to your backup. That's all I was pointing out is that particular threat is more widely mitigated in a wide area system than it would be in, say, a county-wide. That's all I was pointing out.
Okay, because I'm glad you cleared that, because if I lost my PSAP, you're right, I'd move it over here.
Mm-hmm.
But my emergency responders would go to the EOC one,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
not the PSAP.
Yeah, that's fine. It was just an option. That's all it was. Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Buffington.
All right, thank you. Well, as Deputy Swick-Taranovich talked about, we're having some openings right now on our regional interoperable chairs. So that leads to, I guess, lackluster participation in the UGC. Our last meeting was June 16th, which happened to be during the DDR, which led to, again, decreased participation, which is fine. Back to some of Blake's points, the things that the UGC has to start considering, it's all tied together. The questions that we have to answer at the UGC level, and trust me when I say every day there's more questions than there are answers, and we're starting to overcome that. However, that falls into some of the timeliness, some of the things Blake needs to have answered regarding those consolidation grants. To that, on July 28th at 9 o'clock in the morning, there's going to be a user group committee meeting at the DPS building, Orrin Pape. downtown for the sole purpose, I shouldn't say sole, but for the main purpose of considering Dallas County's application to Isicsb. Now, this is our first step into this process. So, regard to the process, the Dallas County has submitted a letter of intent. We need to do our best to make sure that that gets out there, that people that want to join or intend to join Isicsb have that letter of intent stating their purposes. With that, from there, that's received by the chair. The chair will get that packet forwarded out. Now, that packet is things like the MOA, any resolutions that from subordinate local governments that might need to be signed. And then right now we're talking about some sort of technical consultation to determine levels of access. Is it just interoperability only? Is it full access with the addition of towers, things like that? So soup to nuts, if you will. So from that technical consultation needs to occur in, I guess, in the UGC's opinion, in my opinion, on a couple different levels, not just for the UGC, for us to utilize those subject matter experts in helping us discern what's going to work best on this platform. And again, having Motorola being able to walk with us during that, but also for the applicant. What information do they need? What technical information do they need to submit to us that we can make our best recommendation back to this body, to the Isicsb board, so that as we make our recommendations, it's not going to interfere, hamper, interrupt anything that the vendor is doing at this point. So then from there, it's the board vote. So that's really where we're at right now, and we're just hoping to really get some footing after our meeting on the 28th. So I have nothing further unless there's any questions.
I believe we'll have some out-of-state people assisting us in Indiana and Illinois that have been through this before.
Yeah, there'll be a number of subject matter experts from other states as well as some of the resources that we have here. We have some great resources, but these people have been through the process. So yeah, they will be there, and I encourage anyone that's interested, please attend.
Okay, thank you. Chair Grosskirth, are you on the phone?
I am.
Okay, proceed.
The Finance Committee met Tuesday at 2 p.m. We changed our date due to it being the fiscal year end for the state and giving the people that do our finances some time to get that year-end information out and completed. Our committee report includes all the items on the agenda here, so I will go through those. Regarding the budget reports, the Isicsb request, total expenditures in June is $37,923.94. Of that, the state paid the feds paid $30,390. Sorry, I cannot communicate. $30,339.15. The committee did recognize that there was a charge for $3,122 for phones on the report and questioned that, and DPS has gotten back to us that was charged to us in error, and it will be removed from the interoperability accounts and show on the July statements. As far as the total grant goes, that is a $2,070,323 grant. There is $1,164,042.24 remaining in the grant. Of that dollar amount, the federal government has paid $931,233.39, and the state has matched that at $232,808.85. Need to note that the remaining amount of $1,164,042 is overstated slightly, quite a bit, in that the ICN network has not billed our board for services since October, and they have done a significant amount of work for us. We are urging them to get that bill to us next month, and a very conservative estimate of the bill is $125,000. Nikki is working on a documentation plan to develop for the fiscal year 2017 to ensure that we get timely billing on that. our annual appropriation that we receive from the state and have received since 2013. Recall that unused revenues roll to the next year for our use. Our total revenues received through fiscal year 2016, $360,138. Expenditures through June 30th, 2016, $175,052. Expenditures for fiscal year end 2016 of just that, or this last year that we finished, were $92,338. We have remaining in our appropriation funds of $175,052. We also have been awarded a new appropriation for fiscal year end 2017 in the amount of $154,661. So our new balance is $329,713. That is the report on the financials. Are there any questions? There being no questions, the Connect. Was there a question?
No, go ahead.
Okay. Connect Nation contract that is on our agenda. The Finance Committee recommended board enter into contract on an hourly basis pending legal review of contract last month to ensure that the contract truly is an hourly based contract and with no obligations to pay should we not use it for the full term. It has been confirmed that the contract is an hourly based contract, so the committee does recommend approval of that Connect Nations contract.
Kelly, when does that expire?
Expires the end of July.
I believe the end of end of this month.
Would you like to make a motion for that, or are you recommending a motion to enter into the contract as hourly with the AG's approval?
Yes.
Okay, I'll entertain that motion then. You go ahead and make your motion.
I move that we enter into contract with Connect Nation on an hourly basis with AG approval.
Okay, I have a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
Is there any more discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
Okay, that motion passes.
Regarding the travel requests on the agenda, it was brought to our attention the experts coming in from Ohio. That the committee has determined that the board and the committee have both approved that in the past meeting, and that is good news that it's going to be far less than originally thought to be. So, and then the old business item that's later on in the agenda, I'm going to go ahead and give a report on that because I am unsure I'll be able to stay on the phone for the end. The Governance Committee has assisted with this significantly and greatly appreciated. The history of this, and this is regarding federal engineering contract and services. In December of 2015, a motion was made for the procurement of federal engineering not to exceed $50,000 for the project timeline for the LMR system. That was passed and approved by us. We have since learned that we made too narrow of a motion for what we need to use those services for. The Governance Committee has reviewed the motion and has made the following recommendation, and this is your old business item, revised finance resolution from December 2015, expanded use of funds. Here's what the Governance Board Committee has suggested, and I'm going to read their suggestion to be modified the motion as follows. Kelly Grosskirth made a motion for the procurement of federal engineering contracted not to exceed $50,000 for the project timeline for the LMR system. We're going to add to this motion and assist the board and its committees in developing processes for and establishing technical criteria necessary to bring new users into Isicsb, and also provide advice and counsel to Isicsb project team, including but not limited to design reviews, research and identifying LMF best practices of any kind necessary to drive effective and efficient governance and oversight, with a goal of Isicsb being recognized as a national model of interoperability. Does anyone have any questions on what we're doing with that?
My understanding is you're expanding the motion from the last time to allow more funds to
Yes.
be spent
Okay.
rather than, or not necessarily funds, but the motion to expand the use of federal engineering for other purposes beside just the timeline, which the motion was pretty narrow as. Is that what I'm understanding?
Correct. The dollar amount is still not to exceed $50,000, but to expand what we can use them for within that $50,000.
Okay. So are you making the motion, or are you reporting that, or would you like Bob Unia from the governance to make that motion during his report?
I'm going to have Bob make that motion. We've got it on our agenda under old business, and I am not sure I can be on the call to that extent. So I'm going to defer to having Bob make that motion when it comes to the agenda.
You want discussion now or then?
Just later.
That would be up to the chair there.
Yeah, we'll
Chair
do it
Lampy.
later.
Okay. And that is the completion of my report.
Thank you, Kelly.
Thank you.
She said she concurred with that. Governance. Mr. Uni, you're anxious.
I'll take the witness stand, where
All
I've been too many times, I'm afraid. So I passed out a document earlier today. There's three things stapled together. On the top is labeled Document 1. That's the Governance Committee members. And we currently have 4 board members on the Governance Committee. Although Denise has accepted the leadership of the Training and Exercise Committee, and she tells me this morning she may elect to stay on the Governance Committee or move. Depends maybe on her workload as she determines that. Document 2, then, the next document, is a 6-page document that's the background for the Governance Committee discussion to what Chair Grosskirth just talked about. And the subject is really the problem statement in a way. Need for external resources to facilitate and expedite standing up ICS application process within the user group committee. And it's really, we're talking about additional resources to assist the board through the user group committee and other committees as the chair deems necessary to do the work that we need to do in bringing people onto and assisting people coming onto the new radio system. So there's 6 pages that talk about it. At the end, on page 4 of 6, we have some conclusions starting at line 156. And conclusion 1 is really kind of states, it's concise enough to state what we need to say here. The board does not have sufficient or appropriate staff resources to assign to all interoperable projects, including FirstNet. Then it goes on. We're just short resources. We're short horsepower to do what we need to do. After many years of trial and turmoil, we're to the place now where we're going to start bringing people onto a system, and we need to be able to deliver those services in a timely, appropriate way. And as it stands right now, we don't have enough volunteer resource to do that in the eyes of the governance committee. And so we need to do something different. Recommendations on page 5. There's 6 different recommendations. And essentially, we need to do something to help the board and the user group committee fulfill our commitment to the user community as they come on. And as I see it, we would have an external consultant review applications, make a recommendation to the user group committee, and the user group committee then would act upon those recommendations. And it's the review of the application process that takes the time. And we've made some estimates about what that is, but there's a lot of hours that we're talking about. So that's the background. Document 3 we'll talk about during agenda item 20C. And this then is a summary of the Governance Committee's report and recommendations on this matter. That's my report for this part of the meeting, Mr. Chair. Questions or comments from the board members?
Can I ask a question, please, sir?
Please, Sheriff.
I understand that as the system grows and there's a point of connectivity and a need for local jurisdictions to tie into it so we can work, especially through interoperability, because that's really our only responsibility as a board. I understand that there's going to be a need to answer questions and share protocols or information so that another body can in fact tie into us, whether it be a jurisdiction or whatever. One question I have for you is this particular authorization going to authorize us marketing out to jurisdictions the use of this program on an operational stance? Because if it is, then we're wrong. That's not our charge here as a board. So I just want to know if we're going to be paying people to be salespeople of this system, or just sharing information about the system, making them aware it's available if they want to look at it, and if there's questions that come up, how they can in fact tie to it. There's a difference there.
Yes, there is, Sheriff, and I support the latter. Is what our responsibilities are.
Okay, so the sharing of information, then you're saying,
and
how to do it. I just want to make sure we don't go down that path because, you know, local taxpayers, we represent them, all of us on this board. And therefore, we don't want to go ahead and say it's us against them in the sense of the state is trying to go ahead and get into private industry. That's just that rumor alone causes us heartburn. So we want to try to avoid it. And I think it's important that we make that statement clear up front rather than later on having somebody turn around and saying, hey, we heard that, right? So let's make sure that whatever we do, we make it very clear that we're not out trying to market or sell our system as the one to join. From an operational standpoint, I think that's essential for us.
Yeah, Sheriff, if I could call your attention to the assumptions on page 1. So assumption number 1 is Isics has a duty to provide a standardized process for Isics users to apply for access and resources to evaluate these applications in a timely manner. That stands on its own 2 feet. We have a duty based on statute, based on our rule, to come up with a process if somebody wants to join any interoperability platform that we have.
Yeah, I understand.
Okay, so that's one. Number 2 is, now we get into the question you just broached, or perhaps getting around the question you just broached. Does Isics have a duty to provide assistance to that local in completing the application process? In other words, do we just establish the forms and process to be used and say, okay, locals, here, go figure it out yourself? Or do we have an obligation as a board through our funding to help assist them fill out the forms to determine whether or not they want to come on the system?
You talking about operationally or interoperability?
No, interoperability.
Okay.
I'm just talking about interoperability.
Perfect, yeah.
That makes sense. Are you in alignment with those 3 assumptions?
Yeah, that's what I've said. I said as long as we stick to that particular point.
So then if the next element of what you've just asked is if an entity says, yes, we wish to use the statewide system for interoperability, but hey, before we go spending any money, how do we figure out what it takes for us to do operability? Now, what we don't have right now, and it makes some sense to at least have the conversation, whether it comes through the CIO's office, whether it comes out of this group, whether it comes out of DAS, there probably should be a cadre of consultants so that we don't end up with 150 consultants representing the 326 law enforcement and fire agencies around the state coming to the board with different perspectives of how the system works or what it does or should do or shouldn't do. And so this is step 1. The step 1 is, do we have a duty to help locals come on the system? That I think is part of the question. So right now, we're assuming that
Okay.
we have to work through it. Do we have a duty to help them come on for interoperability?
And I totally agree with that. Now let me just make a comment before you go too far, okay? That is a simple fact. What you've said is totally right, and what Bob Uni has indicated, that interoperability it's essential, and we have to have the resources and the availability for that pathway. But we've got to watch a fine line here. It's a razor's edge. It's a very sharp razor's edge, and razors cut very deeply. And my point on it is simply this. If DAS or some other body outside this board desires to say, how can you put your operation onto the state system, to the daily operation, that's fine for them to do that. I am saying that I feel that is outside the realm of what this board's responsibility is. It's fine for us to go to DAS or whoever the state deems to be the coordinator of that processes, and for us to say, get a hold of the widget group, because they are the ones that take care of operation, but that is not our responsibility. So my point is that I would not want to have a document that begins to meld and fog over those two particular things. I wouldn't want our employees participating in anything that's going to now end up being in competition against private industry, or with go ahead and try to get us to market something. We don't do that. I agree that it's a system that probably makes sense. I agree it only, that it should be available if it's possible. I agree that, but that is not our charge as a board that deals with interoperability. So if the state wants to go ahead, and if they want to have the widget group over here that does that part of it, we hand it off and somebody asks us about it. We talk to them and all we want to do about how we take care of the interoperability part. But when they go ahead and say, well, what if we want to do our daily operations on, we have to learn to shut our mouth, because that's not our charge, and we let them deal with whoever is in charge of that. That's what I'm saying. Now, maybe you don't agree with me on it, wouldn't be the first time. So that's what I'm just trying to say. I want to make sure that we have that discussion, because I don't want to get in the middle of this whole quagmire thing that can happen. So that's my question. So when you started saying, if somebody asks us about operations on the system, we now have to quit that and say, get a hold of whoever the state opts to do that.
Just to be, let's have your eyes wide open, though.
Oh,
Let's
yeah,
be
they're wide
crystal
open.
Clear.
Trust me.
I don't know about that, Sheriff.
All right.
If this board ends up with 150 different consultants approaching the user group committee saying, here's the best plan for County X, and 2 days later or 3 minutes later, it's another consultant with a different view of what's best for County Y, that group will be ground to a halt.
All right.
They won't have the capacity, they don't have the human talent or capacity to answer those questions appropriately. So the part of the question is that we do have to at least have our eyes wide open about, there are going to be people that are going to want to use this for operations. There are going to be people that are not going to want to use it for operations, and we still have an obligation to figure out how we open the door to them. So someone's using their own, they're going to build their own system, God bless them. They still want to be able to have interoperability when they travel to another part of the state.
Yeah, yes, I understand that.
We have to have a methodology to do that. Of the 75 counties with 25,000 or less, they're going to have to outsource that. The technology to make that happen. And so my point is, as we look at this, if the board says, no, we're not going to touch that area, we need to be ready for a whole back end that gets very expensive in addressing all of these various creative solutions that may show up because we're not following a standard model. That's all I'm bringing up.
You're making an assumption there. That's an error.
It isn't if you look at Minnesota.
Yes, it is.
It isn't if you look at Ohio. It isn't if you look at other
Yes, it
states.
is. Now, and what I'm saying by that, if the state who owns the system, if they feel that they want to have narrowed protocols, a group of experts who address their system, then the state should do that. The state should say, we have these 2 or 3 expert groups or experts who you, Mr. Local, should contact in order to know how you can get on our system. What I'm telling you is that is the state's responsibility. And it should be done for the exact reason you said. I hate to burst anybody's bubble at this table, but we are not the state. So we will not take any action the state should take. Our job here is to make sure we have smooth interoperability. And that's where it ends. If the state wants to go ahead and put money forth to go ahead and find people who are going to tell them how they should direct and connect clean, which by the way is I would recommend for the exact reasons you said, then the state should do that.
So if I hear you, you're saying that it makes sense to you that that would come out of, say, the CIO's office, a master contract of some other entity outside of this board?
Yes.
Okay, but you agree with me that the hazard to the board of not having that, if that isn't established, we are going to end up with the user group committee having a.
Totally agree with that.
Okay.
I'm just saying we should not have we shouldn't be involved in that. Tell me what we need to do to make interoperability smooth, and let's deal with that, because that's our bailiwick, that's our realm. Beyond that point, I agree that if the state's going to own a system, they'd be foolish not to have a means of connectivity to it so it's done smoothly. I think, frankly, the state seems to forget their job is to supplement local. So the bottom line on it is it would just charge them, it would be smart for them in order to meet that supplemental request to have something in order. What I'm simply telling you, Mr. Swick, is this board is not part of that. We have a charge that is much, much more a fine line than that. So that's where I say about the razor's edge. There's a point where we just need to hand off that if inquired by a local or other entity, I don't care, because who knows, it might be ambulance services someday, who knows, about how to connect for daily operation, then the state should have their crap together and we should just hand it off to them, and it should not be part of this board. That's all I'm saying. So now, if I'm wrong, that's what you have this pleasure of a vote for. So, but at least I think it's important to get that out.
I think, Mr. Sheriff, we've wandered into an area of disagreement after your elocution there, so we'll have to see where that goes.
It's fine.
Are there comments or from any other board members? So we'll continue this with item 20C.
Okay. Old business. Okay, Ted, you're next.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The report from the Operations Committee has been very brief. Couple things, the points I want to make during our meeting that we had. The Operations Committee, the people who were in attendance, did unanimously vote to recommend, and this is old business, but I'm going to bring it up now, to recommend that we move forward with the purchase of that truck. There was also discussion that the board really should take a moment to determine whether or not a truck and trailer combination is feasible, for all 3 units. And if that in fact does happen, that we look at the possibility of making sure that we have not just a maintenance process. Maintenance processes are pretty simple, every 6,000 miles or every, 6 months you check something, but really a monitor process so that somebody goes out literally on a daily basis and makes sure that there's not a flat tire on it, or make sure that, there's not something wrong with it, the batteries are dead. So if we do tie, I know this one situation, we're going to tie a truck to the trailer. We want to make sure that we also develop some sort of monitoring process for that. That brings me to the second thing. Cindy Fox was an employee with the Department of Public Safety. She no longer is. So we are in the process right now of finding somebody who'll take over the subcommittee to monitor and to coordinate the STR trailers. We're still working on that aspect of it. So anybody who wants to leap to the forefront of taking over that subcommittee, you have great personnel on it. I would ask you please to contact me or to contact the board or the chairman or the SWIC.
Sheriff, question.
Yes, please go ahead.
On that topic.
Which topic?
The monitoring.
Yes.
I think that's a wonderful, having in a previous life had some of that stuff to keep an eye on. The monitoring aspect of that often gets lost.
Mm-hmm.
They think in terms of maintenance, but the monitoring. Is that something that you envision there being volunteers to do that? Or is that something that we should consider a more formal outsourcing of that responsibility? The reason I bring it up is because the trailers now have some age on them.
Mm-hmm.
things that need to be done. Our volunteers may or may not be familiar with checking the age of tires and when they were manufactured. You get it out, you haul it down the road, it blows one out. Oh gosh, that's tire's 7 years old. Well, the trailer's only 3, but we bought, tire got put on there was 3 years old before, that sort of stuff. Or is that something that your group feels is workable for the volunteer committee? And he was pointing at me.
The situation we ran across was that there's been discussion on all that stuff.
Great, thank you.
And the discussion is just simply depends upon where it's at. For instance, and Wally's here, so I'll pick on him in the back. His bailiwick, if he happens to have one at his place, chances are he'll just automatically jump on board with that because that's the type of guy he is and his group are. But if we put it maybe at a post somewhere where you have different troops in and out all the time, and then we're going to have to go ahead and find somebody there that can do that. So it almost forces us, since we have 3 definitive locations and 3 separate units, we're going to have to do those on a case-by-case basis. And that means we need to come up with a checklist of things. And once we look at that checklist, we have to reevaluate how can that be applied and who would apply it. So that, to answer your question, it could be different in all cases, depending upon where the placement is. Getting that subcommittee back up and running here underneath one head I think we'll go far in answering that question.
Thank you.
That is a start.
Yeah, thank you.
Getting back to what I said, Vice Chair Ellen, looking at you and thinking of Ellen. Ellen went ahead and had the phone call. It was very limited. I was gone. I was at my national sheriff's. And on it, we just had a few people on it, and they recapped the meeting that we had last Thursday. And one of the members, Alicia Litke, is wanting to know if she advice she can help with the trailer. So we'll put her in contact with Wally, I think, on this, if that hasn't happened already. Then Roger also talked about he'd like to promote the use of the trailers. One of the things that they were also working on is how can we get these trailers out to jurisdictions? Maybe what we want to do is we want to just start to have a flowing meeting where we're going to contact the jurisdiction for the East trailer and say, hey, come on over, or let's do something to get people there to take a look at it. Maybe utilizing the E911 people might be a way of getting around it. They're brainstorming that right now. But we want to promote the trailers too. That's the other thing. If I just can have just a couple more moments here, Liberty. I'm retiring January 2nd, and that's going to be accumulation of a 30-year career as sheriff and almost 41 years in law enforcement. One of the things I've discovered, and I've really discovered the last year, is the fact that when you go to retire, time is fleeting. I'm in an agency that, as sheriff, and Tom knows this because he worked in the area, you do everything. So I've got a lot of stuff to work on, concentrate on. So with that said, I'm going to this effect of this meeting, I'm going to step down from the chairman of operations because I'm just not giving good time to it. Ellen is the vice chair, and she can take the reins by this, but I also know that we need to either look at a permanent chair, albeit be her, or someone to take her place. So I want to ask the leadership of this board to think about that and work with her on it. Now, whatever I can do, please, by all means. I would like to stay on the committee while I'm here on this board, though, if at all possible. And that actually brings me to number 2. My last meeting with the board will be in September. I've been talking to our president of this Iowa State Sheriffs and Deputy Association, our past president and our incoming president on this. And we're well aware as an association the requirements needed and necessary for political appointments. I understand that as well as anybody here. As a matter of fact, I also know the battles and the fights that can go on. And I didn't come on this committee for the first 14 months of its existence because of one of those battles. And ultimately, not that I wanted to, but my association wanted me to. Our association will research who we think could be the best for this position with an understanding of what it takes to work with interoperability and moving forward on this. But also more importantly, and this is for those of you who aren't familiar with sheriff's offices, I understand that you're going to go, what? Yeah, there's a bias here. There's a true bias. And that bias is not for the state or municipals or even the county necessarily, or the PSAPs or anything else. It's for the office of sheriff. We are the only elected body that serves all of the for law enforcement, all the taxpayers out there and all the citizens. That is something that I've taken near and dear to my heart, and having that thought process has allowed me a blessed career. It's taken me all around the world. It's put me on governmental committees at the state and federal and international levels. And it's been very, very good for me. And I hope that I've been able to contribute something back on those things. I look back on stuff like I was in the original COPS consortium. I was in the original Communications Law Enforcement Assistance Act group. I was on LEATSIC. I was involved with the Science Technology Director to Homeland Security when they talked about FirstNet, and they brought it before us for our approval. When we talked about interoperability, communications, and the lack thereof during 9/11, and we approved what you are now here today on. So for me to be here at this level, it's been something that I love. The Sheriffs and Deputies Association will make an appointment based on someone who understands the office of sheriff. We're not going to worry about Republican or Democrat, and the governor understands that. That's their problem at a bigger scale. We want to make sure that whoever comes in here, maybe is not as boisterous and blustery as I can be, but at least that there's somebody who's going to go ahead and remind themselves and remind whoever's here about the importance of the local person. Now, I want to stay out here through September, and I'm going to tell you why. When I started this in 1987, one of the things that amazed me drastically, and I'm saying this group because this group right now is kind of in a driving chair of this. There was this massive us versus them divide between the state patrol and county sheriffs. There were sheriffs that would not allow troopers into their county, which the code allows for. I'm here to tell you that one of the biggest things that I've had to fight since I've been on here, and frankly because of a lack of information or knowledge on the parts of those who rebelled, is the fact that it is not us versus them. And that's why you'll hear me time and time again when I hear something that comes up like a flag, that I mention that. Because if nothing else, the fact that it's a matter of record is important. The state does not control the county. Never will. It's happened in other counties, other states, and it's failed. Henry Ford said, you know, if you go ahead and you want to give federal government full control and have them take care of you, or state or one entity, you think that's the best thing to do? Ask the American Indian how that went. Didn't work very well. Well, that's a little different, but there's always a fear of that. So recently, just within the last couple of weeks, a sheriff flared up, reached out to all the other sheriffs. This board went ahead, went around the sheriff, supposedly, I don't know if it's true or not, don't care, went right to their board of supervisors. Didn't tell sheriff, but wanted to go ahead and market the statewide system for operations. That is not our job. And I'm here to tell you something. You don't want to pick a fight with those elected officials. Please don't. Listen, they had offices in my facility. Let's not allow this to take us back 20 years. We have a charge, build it from there. People will migrate onto it, but don't turn around and market yourself. We'll grow with it. We'll do fine with it. It's a right way. But what I'm telling you simply is this. Make sure you do it the right way. All right? And that's all I got to say.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I got one question on the trailer when you want a standard. So you have a plan you're going to come up with for standardization for the checklist?
They're working on a checklist of standardization, trying to figure out what we're lacking in certain trailers. Mm-hmm. And then there'll be that, and there'll be a monitoring thing for a regular monitoring basis, what should be done, whoever gets control of the trailer, and the same thing with maintenance.
Okay.
And then, so that'll all come together as a package when it's all done, Tom.
Okay, so what I would ask is you get Dave Wilson involved, because he
Yep.
does an excellent job with the east side.
Yep,
I mean,
Johnson,
he's very,
yep.
very, very good and religious on checking that east trailer. It's probably the best maintained trailer we have, and I don't check mine or ours as much as I probably should, but Dave is up to speed on everything and making sure that that trailer's functional. So he probably has some type of checklist?
He does. He has a checklist, and the group has it already.
Okay.
And so that's what they're building off of, is his.
Oh, good.
But the one problem we have, again, is the 3 trailers aren't exactly the same.
Right.
So they're trying to make sure that they figure out what the differences are. Then they'll do the inventory, and I don't even know, like, when Cindy left, I don't know where we were at on getting the inventorying process done. So there's some gaps there that we're not really sure where we're at. You know, that software and scanner.
I just don't want 3 checklists, different kinds.
No, everything will be exactly the same, and that's the other goal is ultimately, we know it can't happen right away, but ultimately we're gonna go ahead and have the trailers as close as possible too, so that they can flow back and forth for exactly what was asked before about if something occurs, okay? Yep.
All right, Mr. Ben? Oh, sure.
You mentioned the truck trailer combo. Is that something you're gonna look at moving forward, like a cost, or strategically replace the trailers with a truck trailer combo? Or was that just a suggestion?
The trailer, okay, we have the trailers. We'll just talk what we have in hand.
Right.
The truck was one that the DOT was getting rid of.
Yeah, that's the
Okay,
additional.
that's that one. So we're gonna bring that on board. Well, then the thought rose up about, getting a certain type of truck, something that's adequate, rather than hooking something up to it that's inadequate and trying to go 100 miles with it and God knows what happens. Maybe we're better off to try to match these things together. Don't even know if it's feasible yet, and that'll depend upon what comes up in an auction later on. But ultimately, having that whole process so there's connectivity, and then once you have that in hand, that'll allow you to say, well, how are we going to replace it? What's the cost of replacement? And those things. But you got to get that far into it first. Yep.
All right. Mr. Benson?
All right. For the LMR outreach webinars, we did conduct, as Craig talked about, we did conduct the technical ones on the 29th of June. We had 2 that day. We ended up with about roughly 70 people attending those webinars. We do have 2 more scheduled for the 20th, which will complete the initial group of 4 webinars that we'd scheduled. And we decided after we get done with that, we're going to end up doing monthly updates. It's on. I can hear myself. Why can't you hear me? Okay. So we'll start with monthly updates going forward from that and kind of develop those as we see what is happening. It'll have a little bit about what Melvin's doing in terms of the company deployment, where it's at, updates to the UGC process, just kind of a steady feed for people that are interested, and also take a look at questions that we're seeing, get those answered. So that'll be the plan moving forward. And most of the other elements that we'll be talking about, Sean will either talk about or Craig has already talked about. So that's my report for the month.
Okay, thank you, sir. Sean? FirstNet Outreach Specialist, you're up.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Helen gave a pretty good overview of what I've been working on and what we've been working on together, as well as Mr. Benson, but just as a quick recap, we're working on, continued FirstNet outreach. I don't know if you want me to wait until new business or if you're going to cover it yourself in the new business, the 101, 201, 301.
I'll call you back.
Okay. And then I will also wait for the Y School update for that point as well. But right now we are actively working on addressing the website. We have had some I'm going to say issues that we're working through with the Office of the CIO concerning billing for the website and support and maintenance, and developing an understanding of how we'll work together on the website, as well as moving to the new fully supported state platform. There's a lot of contractual stuff and things going on with the OCIO's office right now with websites and where the state as a whole is going. So there will be another update next month. Beyond that, we are working on the new PowerPoint update, new outreach stuff, and then again, I'll cover that and the Y schools in the later update. So that's what I have, unless anyone has any questions.
Move on to training and exercise. Wally, do you have anything? Okay. Technology committee.
Right
Patrick,
here.
you're right there. All right.
Hopefully we can cheer things up a little here.
Go ahead.
All right, well, we had 3 agenda items in June, and the first item was a Minnesota Field Operations Guide update that was sent by Craig Allen. Craig wanted the technology committee to kind of scrub this document or documents to see if Iowa had any updates that needed to be submitted to Minnesota for their field operations guide. This documentation was sent out to all of the members. There really wasn't much, sorry. Is this on? Okay. There wasn't much input from the members other than Eric Nevins did remind us that one change was the point-to-point channel here in Iowa added the DCS 271 tone. And Rob Dennert also has a really neat web page, if you will, that has all of this information with regards to mutual aid channels, interoperability channels, fire channels, EMS. And so one of the things that I'd like to see done here in the future maybe is to have Rob's Robcom or whatever it is that has all this information maybe used as a central location to refer to off of the Isicsb web page. So if people have any questions about what some of these agencies are using or have been using, they can go to that because it seems to me that it's pretty accurate. So, and that this whole issue with Minnesota Field Operations Guide kind of gels with the Iowa Field Operations Guide that we're working on. So we're still working with fire and EMS people to try to gather some of their input. And so there's more to come with developing those field operations guide. The next issue was the Isicsb P25 platform fleet mapping. There's really been no movement on that as of right now, just because of the NGA taking place. And it was brought to our attention that Westcom is now connected to the Isicsb system with 2 simulcast sites connected up and running and fleet mapped with 16 talk groups and cored through a new central location. And it's the hopes that with upcoming DDR optimization meetings that we can start moving forward with some of this fleet mapping discussion. As a side note, as far as the Department of Corrections goes, I want to start pulling in our technicians from around the state to see what they would like to do as far as fleet mapping the Department of Corrections, since we're already set up and ready to go. We just need to program our 70 plus mobiles and 9 control stations. All we need to do is just fleet map it to the system and we would be up and running. So I'm going to start pulling those people into discussions here, hopefully before the end of August. So that's it. Thanks.
All right. Mr. Lombard, FirstNet Broadband Subcommittee will give us an update on the FirstNet progress.
Good afternoon, Chair, board members. I have just a couple of brief updates. We're in a very interesting period with FirstNet right now, as the RFP process is midstream right now. They're in the process of going through the evaluations to choose a prime vendor. So there's zero information coming out about that right now. The rumors aren't even any good. And so we're letting all that federal procurement process happen the way it needs to happen. Timelines are always what people ask, and in our committee we kind of looked at some of the scenarios of what that really means. And there's like a best case and a worst case. Best case is that there's a prime vendor that shows up in the federal procurement process, head and shoulders above the other vendors, and it's a pretty clear-cut decision. And so a intent to award can be processed, and then the process happens. That prime vendor is awarded, and immediately that prime goes to work in developing what's called the state plans, where all the states and territories would have their plan developed, and a draft state plan would be dropped into the state for review. And if that is good, then great. If it's not, then there could be some discussion. But then shortly thereafter, we don't know how long, 30, 60, 90 days, the final state plan would be dropped on the state by FirstNet. And then that starts a 90-day period that the governor can choose to opt in or opt out on its surface. And if he adopts it immediately, it goes into build out immediately. So we don't anticipate seeing the draft state plan. It'd be nice if we saw it yet this calendar year. We don't anticipate that. But in the procurement process, if the vendors appeal and we go into some drawn out process, that could make that initial procurement process more drawn out. So right now we're in that waiting period, waiting to see who the prime vendor will be. So here's what the committee's been doing in the meantime. We have 2 task forces underway right now. One is the tribal outreach. We're required as a state to reach out and not just provide education, but collaboration with the settlements and the various tribes within the state of Iowa. The committee has already had their first meeting with Sac and Fox, and we have an existing relationship with them from the BTOP era. And so we've worked building on that relationship right now and asking them to help us go into the other areas in the state that have not been federally recognized, but are still able to be part of the entire FirstNet process. The other group is as you heard before, the QPP. Just to dumb down the QPP conversation, if you've ever been in a major city and you've seen an HOV lane, and an HOV lane allows the traffic to pass, and you don't have to put a blow-up dummy in it to count as 2 people for this. But the HOV lane is really what quality of service, priority, and preemption begins to discuss. Within the construct of the FirstNet cellular network, who inside that already private space has quality of service, has priority and preemption abilities inside that. And so it allows everyone to be shoved off, everyone to be just moved over and prioritized. It allows those processes to happen. FirstNet has requested that each FEMA region provide input as to how they would like to have this QPP treatment designed for the LTE network. So Iowa is hosting our FEMA region, and we have a meeting in Osceola at Southwest Community College, August 16th for the entire FEMA region. FirstNet's coming in, and this is going to be a think tank discussion to help develop that QPP strategy for our FEMA region entirely. And so we have appointed a task force of 5 individuals from the Broadband Committee to serve on that and to provide input on behalf of the state of Iowa. We think this is a healthy process out of FirstNet because they're asking questions. They're not telling us what to do. They're asking us to provide them feedback in how we think it should go so that they're able to build that LTE fabric with their prime vendor in keeping with the scope of what the states are looking for. And just a couple other things. We thought we had closed off the task force on opt-in, opt-out on the entire rolling conversation of that idea. We've kept the task force open. There's been a few more iterations of material back and forth from outside the state. We haven't had anything from inside the state, but some consultants at large in the nation have been kind of throwing their wares at the state of Iowa, saying, well, you guys should opt out and you should do it in a private sense. They haven't sent a checkbook with any of their offers yet, but we're listening and making certain. And here's why in a serious note, here's why we're keeping the door open to that conversation. Should FirstNet provide, through their prime vendor, provide and lay in front of the state of Iowa a plan that doesn't do Iowa law enforcement first responders well, it's partial, or it's incomplete, or it doesn't augment well. It doesn't collaborate well with the other systems that is valuable to law enforcement in the state of Iowa. Then we would need another lane to go down and open up another conversation at which we would grab very close into the private sector and say, let's put our heads together and reevaluate this process. Everything on the surface right now, we have nothing from the private sector pushing us that direction. We're not pushing that direction. But until we see what FirstNet is defined for this state, we can't really say that all options are off the table. It would require a massive effort and collaboration, public and private partnerships, in order to do anything different. So we're keeping that task force as a live round to continue to look at all this information that keeps coming into us from these consultants who would like a piece of that FirstNet pie, which we're not against, but it still needs to make fiscal sense for the state of Iowa. So with that, I'd entertain any questions. I have one little bit of a note. The ICN is going to be hosting an Interconnects forum on August 2nd. And this is going to be a technology forum, but we're going to be demonstrating some of the technology that underpins the LMR, that underpins the 911 circuitry, and even do a brief demonstration on some body camera technology purely from a technological wireless perspective. And the last thing is we're set up for our Public-Private Partnership Summit on August 25th. We're hoping to be able to provide some new information to all the vendors who come and all the people who come asking about FirstNet. It'll be held at the Grimes Building I think it's at 1 o'clock, Thursday, August 25th. And we have a new panelist. We have, I believe he's a vice president out of Orion, the former Iowa Network Services, will be on the panel with myself, Dave Duncan, Bobby W., Tom Lampy, and some others. Ryan Boone will be on that also, I believe. So any questions for me? Otherwise, that's our report out of the FirstNet Broadband Committee. Thank you for your time.
Okay, moving on to other reports. Is there any information from any board members that we'd like to throw out that we'd like to discuss today? Okay, we'll move on. Jim Lundstedt, are you still on the phone? Okay. Mr. Mercado? Motorola Project Manager, Isicsb update?
I gotta plug in a video cable here. Let me know when it's visible.
There you go.
All right. Well, thank you for having me here today. It'll be a quick update. There's been a lot of activity happening since last month. Some of this may sound repetitive because it's the nature of where we are right now in the overall process. So the actions taken, again, we have the first of 3 cores that's up and operational. We have the Westcom that's operating on the Isicsb platform right now, so we've completed that integration. We have the Des Moines simulcast cell, which is up and operational. We have the Des Moines dispatch, which is up and operational. And then we moved over to the NGA command dispatch, which is also operational. That's a secondary dispatch, which is in a location here downtown for the NGA operations. We also spent a lot of time optimizing for the NGA. That means fine-tuning the system, making sure that the needs are being addressed with respect to how to program the radios, with respect to where the signal reaches. Basically fine-tuning everything to make sure that the operations to support the NGA are successful. From there, we went to training. So we completed the training to use the dispatch for both locations, also the radios. And two key aspects here have been the Wave application, which allows you to connect to the system via smartphone. So you don't necessarily have to be in the service area to be able to remain connected to the overall system. And we've also completed the training for the GPS as well, which allows for, in context of the NJ, allows for operations to monitor where the radios are for this particular event. So we spent a lot of time, again, just focusing on the operations of the NGA and the system as it's running today. We've also completed the engineering DDR, and we've completed the support for the policy and the technical webinars. We've completed that as well. So if you look at these categories here, the first two really focus on having an operational system and moving Westcom over to the Isicsb platform, which gives us roughly 2,300 radios on the system right now. The second piece of this is really focused on everything NGA. So it's all about making sure that you have what you need for a successful event, that we are supporting your operations. So it's all about training, it's all about programming, it's all about adjusting. We've had a lot of little adjustments here and there because we want to make sure that the system really supports what you need. And then the third piece is really all about all the ongoing efforts with the overall system, the DDR being one of them, but also supporting the outreach process as well. We've seen this diagram before. The blue box here represents the system engineering detail design review, which we held over 3 days. In addition to that, we have our eyes set on the site development we call the A&E detail design review. I'm going to talk about that in a little bit. That's all about just the site development effort, the towers, the shelters, the equipment install, the permitting process, all those kinds of things. And then also there is focus on the optimization DDR, and that's all about how do we want to program the devices and the system to support the operational needs of the Isicsb platform. So, and that we can see that we've sort of gone through and done a mini version of this for NGA where we've adjusted, right? We've programmed and we've fine-tuned and made different changes, but we're seeing this particular DDR to be that at a much bigger scale because it's at a statewide scale. So the detailed design review, we had that in the middle of June, June 14, 15, and 16. We're looking at doing the optimization DDR on October 11 and 12. And then the A&E DDR, we really want to do that in we want to close a book on this the next 30 to 60 days because there's a lot of work that we need to do. And we want to make sure that we lock everything in so we can continue moving forward. You've seen this before. This is actually the status from my last status update. And all I want to remind you here is that we've had a lot of things that we're putting up on the screen, I think a little bit too much. When we talk about, in this case, the point of contacts identified and the formal A&E visits. All the regulatory processes, the NIPAs, and the SHPOs, and the migratory bird notices. And then we have all of the calculating aspect of, is the tower good, is it not good? What do we have to do to make it work better? And overall, with our focus on making sure that we can have the final construction drawings and a notice to proceed so that we can continue, again, moving forward. So, as I mentioned before, the NEPAs are the things that hold us back quite a bit. This is a time-consuming process. So, even though we do structural analysis and all the modification, which also takes time and money, but the NEPAs and the SHPOs are the things that are the things that we, even if we complete everything else, we can't proceed until that piece is done. And again, with our eyes on the final CDs and the notice to proceed. So what I mentioned before is that all of this focus right now has been on the pre-construction, right? But this is really a relay race, right? And we want to get, by the end of September, we want to start moving into the construction phase, right? So we've been focusing on a lot of work. We've been working a lot with DOT and DPS. We meet on a weekly basis. We have conference calls. And it's all about the sites, towers, sites, shelters, land, retaining walls, I mean, you name it. Regulatory processes. So there's a lot of action happening on a weekly basis. You don't normally see that. It's probably a good thing. But what I want to do is going forward is I wanted to simplify this. So right now, this is what we're going to be showing because these are the things that really matter, right? So you see here, you have the formal A&E visits. So interesting to see if you go back and you look at the stuff from last month. We have this number 76, and that's actually lower than it was last time. And the reason for that is because we've run into sites where have been rejected by the FAA, and we have some other sites that we determine that we can't use. So we have to restart the process and start all over again. So NEPAs, we got 46. We actually have 43 in process, so that's a good thing. Structural analysis, right? We want to do 33. We have 23 completed and 8 in process. And then the modification analysis. One thing that you didn't have before is a microwave path verification. And that's important to keep track of that because we need to make sure that the path is good, right? So even though we do all the regulatory processes and whatnot, and on paper, the paper studies look good, we still have to go out and visit every site and have people that actually take the right coordinates and use equipment that they can see. Can they see the other site? So there's a lot of labor involved in this as well, and it's somewhat of a slow process. So I wanted to keep this here so that on a monthly basis you start seeing this as well. So when we break it on a per regional basis, again, it's the same information, but it's just broken out on a per region basis. So this will give you a good idea. And again, we post these on a weekly basis as well. This changes literally every day. So one thing that I want to show here for your information is, for example, on Region 1, we had 2 DOT sites that were rejected by the FAA. It has to do with airports, regulatory processes say the tower can't be this tall. There's an airport such a certain distance away. So you have to meet certain requirements. And so the FAA looks at that, and they've already turned down 2 of our sites. So we have to go back to the drawing board to deal with those. On Region 2, we found that in the process that 2 of the DOT sites that we're using or planned on using never actually had a NEPA perform, which means that we had those scheduled for actually moving a lot quicker, but now this goes back onto into the stack, wait for the regulatory process to continue. For Region 3, we had, again, another another site that was a DPS site that was rejected by the FAA. And we also had another DOT site that we found that had never had the NEPA actually performed. And in order for us to touch the site, to do anything with it, we actually are required to go ahead and do it. Even though the tower's there, it's been built, and it's being used, now that we want to use it, this is stuff that needs to take place. On the second set, so we have on Region 4 was green, no rejects. Region 5, we had 2 DOT sites, again, that were rejected by the FAA. And then on Region 6, we had 2 DOT sites that never had the NEPAs performed. So all it means is we need additional time to do these because we thought we would be able to do them quicker because the NEPA was already done. We'd be able to go in and do our thing, but now we got to start that one kind of have to reset the process. But it's an ongoing thing, right? This is just the nature. This is why this piece tends to be the most frustrating part for everybody, because it's like a chess game. You move this site, now that has an effect on the other site that site is connected to. So now you got to go back and look at that one. Well, that one could be used, but on the other direction, now that's a problem there. So you adjust this one, and it's a whole domino effect. So it's constant. This is why every week we go through these calls, and they're long and lengthy. But we're almost there. We're almost there. This is why we think that by the end of September we should be able to have this all locked down, understanding where we really stand. My goal is we want to get 20 to 30 sites built by the end of this year. So it's a big challenge. So we're looking at what the risks are and what the dependencies are, but in order to keep things moving, we're going to plow through this thing, which is why we want to have this the A&E DDRs done by the end of September. So action items, optimization DDR in October. We want to have the A&E DDR the next 30 to 60 days, so we got to figure out how we're going to do this. We might end up doing it in stages so that we can do it more efficiently, so that we can keep the process rolling. This is why I say 30 to 60 days, right? We're going to continue coordination with Dallas County with that project, because we want to interface them into the core as well. And also we want to do the same thing with Woodbury County, do the same thing with them, interface them into the Isicsb core. One of the greatest advantages that we have, or that you have, is that the state has, fiber assets throughout the state that are helpful in trying to get some of these things done, even if it's a fiber that's activated on a temporary basis until the overall microwave network is deployed. So we're looking at taking advantage of that to also alleviate some of the roadblocks as well. That's all I have. Any questions?
I have a question.
Yes.
Melvin, going back to, I don't know, I think this is the 4th month. We had talked about during contract negotiations, presenting the board with a critical path chart, a PERT chart. I have still not seen one. You have talked about different timelines and different things that affect it, but we don't have a path forward with a firm date. You owe us that. When will we see that?
So what we talked about, and this is part of why we have such a challenge here, is that as we go back to that diagram, let me see if I can find it. Right. So we had dates that we were showing as part of this diagram, right? And this is a simplified view because we got 80-something sites, right? So it gets really complicated. So one of the issues that we have is, and we mentioned this in one of our previous meetings, is that your critical path is the site development, right?
But that doesn't help. But that doesn't help my board. My point is that an overview of this. I know that you know this. I've seen. In fact, I know your company has put them out. I've seen them. You get an overview of the entire project, and then you press, and it goes down, and it drills down, and it drills down, and it drills down. And these 3 sites right here. If you got to fix these 3 sites, okay, we get those 3 sites fixed. My timeline collapses. I can now go from June of 2018.
Yes.
Now I can move it up to April of 2018. That's what I think we're looking for here, is that it helped. The way it's being explained is that it's too opaque on where to put the energy.
Okay.
The critical path helps us help you get what you need. And so my point is that I don't know that there's enough here to help us put resources on it in a way that you need it to be effective. And that's why we asked for the critical path chart during contract negotiations.
Okay.
And so we need it. We really need it, and that needs to be part of your presentation each month to show what last month's looked like, what this month's looked like, and what changed. And so if we're collapsing it, fine. If not, we're pushing it out month after month after month. There's some legislative issues that may become before the board that have to be addressed, or other things that I can't think of at this particular moment. The hazards, if you will. So I think that's really important. I know you guys have been breaking your necks to get National Governors Association done, and I quite frankly, I think we need to applaud their efforts. You guys have really stepped up to the plate. There were things that weren't required that you did. And from my perspective, it's really helped with the interoperability piece. That's fantastic. But we got to have that PERT chart. And I know the software today doesn't necessarily do it. If you need a state agency to perhaps help us facilitate through that, I suspect there's a couple of state agencies that might have resources that could help bring that to fruition. But I think the board needs to see at least the big picture side of it and where the hook, the clunky parts are.
Sure. And what I mentioned last time is that we do have this in a Microsoft project file, which is very busy.
But that's what I'm getting. There are ways to do it where it's not busy. There's ways to do it where you get the,
Yeah,
the
well, you
50,
just
the
collapse it.
100,000-foot
Yeah.
level, and it gives you the straight clerical path. And if we don't get that tower, it's over here. If I just get that one tower and move that off, I move back 3 months. I get this other thing, I move back 2 months. You can begin to see where to focus the energy to get you what you need to help us get what we need.
Okay.
That's my point.
Okay.
This isn't giving us that.
Okay.
Okay,
Any other
anybody else? All right, let's move on to old business. Truck for the STR, Ted's right back to you.
Yeah, just a matter of getting done now. I mean, our recommendations move forward, so I don't know.
So, do you wanna make a recommendation to purchase that DOT truck?
Yeah, that's our committee's recommendation is that we purchase a DOT truck and whatever that consists of. I don't know what the process is for that.
Okay, first of all, Bob, is it still available?
Yes, it is. Yeah, I checked with him.
Okay, so I'll entertain a motion to purchase the truck and give a dollar amount for that.
$5,000.
Yeah.
Okay.
I thought that was all worked out with you guys before, but, yeah, the Operations Committee does recommend that we move forward with the purchase of the truck from the Department of Transportation at the rate of $5,000, and that just basically is just supporting what was made before.
Okay, have a motion for purchase the truck of $5,000 from the DOT from the auction, correct? Do I have a second? Second, Patrick. Any more discussion? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, motion passes. Isicsb Committee, ISSI Committee, Swick Allen and CIO, Von Walfred, I don't believe he's on the phone unless he's joined since, 10:40. We've now been here since it's 12:30, so let's keep moving. So I assume you're gonna take care of that for me.
Yes, we have
Okay.
already, he and I have met. We've identified players we need to have at the table. We have some of them already, and we'll have, probably a goal is to have a PowerPoint presentation if we've got enough information for the board next month as to what that means.
Okay. Are you gonna announce from the chair like this, or with your arm in the air?
We're gonna find out. We're gonna
Okay.
find out later.
All right. New business, Sean, you come back and give us a brief on the FirstNet 101, 201, 301, and 401 process. Get the
C yet?
Excuse me?
I have old business 20C.
Oh, I'm sorry. I had it crossed off because Kelly did. Yes, sir. Back up. Sean, stand by. Bob Uni, if you could finish up revised finance solution for December 2015, the expanded use of funds under 20C.
That's right. Okay, back to our previous discussion. I'd like to, in light of some comments that were received, let's go back to document 2, page 4, and put a little background into this. And I'm gonna call upon Swick Allen to help me out with this. So item number 11 talks about the 4 different levels of user that we'll have on the system. And the point of this discussion is we recognize the fact there's interoperability and operability. And this bullet point here, this item number 11, starting at line 136, going through line 152, is an estimate I made, just to get an idea what sort of money that we're talking about in the big picture. And so this is my estimate, but Craig, would you talk to A, B, C, D, the different types of levels, please?
Sure. So to the sheriff's point, number one is simple. You've got a radio, you want to come on and use the state template. Here's the frequencies, it's a code plug, you plug and play, we can do that all day. It doesn't take any special dispensation to make that happen. Level number two would take, and now they're wanting to do something beyond just interoperability. And to the sheriff's point, whether or not we get involved with helping them, we have to have the skills, knowledge, and ability to evaluate the consequences to the system. Someone has to do that. Motorola would be at the table to help evaluate that, but there are consequences to adding talk groups, there's consequences to adding operational impacts, or to interfacing systems through the ISSI, might be another example. The third level is those users then come on and they want other feature sets and perhaps enhanced coverage that may or may not include towers. And then the last one would be enhanced coverage and advanced feature sets that does include towers. And so all of that, there's a cost to the board on this end or someone on this end to evaluate that. And so that was the reason for back in the assumptions is the assumptions, if we're not in this business, we don't have to worry about it. If we are in the business of the system, then we have some oversight and need to make sure that we stay in compliance with the contract. That's kind of the bottom line of this number 11.
Okay, thank you, Craig. Is there board member discussion on this element of the analysis?
For clarification, if I could, sir, the cost per user is the $300 times 50 users, for instance, or whatever you've put down here. Is that money billed back to us or to the end user? Whatever that estimate might be, whatever that cost might be.
Okay. So there's different ways to approach this. My recommendation is that this is a board cost because we need to make the system work and understand how the system's going to work. And so to the extent that those costs fit this model, there are costs.
And they're going to be borne by this board rather than the end user, right?
That is correct.
Okay.
That's my recommendation. That's the reason I prepared this estimate, to try to get an idea of what the cost would be, because it's possible we may have to seek other additional funding from the legislature to do this. Are there other board member questions or comments on this particular part before we move ahead? Okay, let's take a look at document 3. Document 3 is an outcome of the governance committee discussion on document 2 with the recognition that we had some business in December of 2015 that we could leverage by changing the language slightly or modifying the language and utilize what was approved then and has not been utilized to date. And so we thought that would be a way that we could move this ahead. So specifically, and Kelly talked about this just a little while ago, or quite a while ago now, we had a motion that we passed in board business in 2015. And I think had we known then what we know now, the motion would have been different. But we've learned a lot in those 7 months, and we've learned that we have a lot of work to do. And really, that's what our business is about here today, is to deal with the business of the board, what the board has to do relative to bringing new users onto the system. So we've worked long and hard. We on the board and others have worked long and hard. And we don't want there to be a roadblock at this late part of the game. So we want to be able to address the user, bringing the users onto the system in a very expeditious way. So the discussion here in the governance committee recommends discussion by this board relative to, on page 2 of document 3, starting lines 57 through 62, you can see what the modified, the recommendation is to modify the last board action from December of 15. So I'm not going to bother reading that again. So it's just language that helps us do our business in a more business-like, better way. It supports the board. It supports the user group committee in doing their work. And it helps the user community. So I stand ready for questions.
The $50,000 that we've already approved, but you want to expand the use of it is different from what you're saying on document with the 300,000 estimate that we would probably try to shoulder to help locals understand and.
Okay, there's two elements to this plan. I think we have a short-term plan and a long-term plan. So all of us, we have to work within Department Administrative rules, and there's only so much we can spend on our own authority without going through an RFP process. So this lets us leverage the $50,000 that we approved in December and for immediate needs. And the second element of that is that we would potentially develop an RFP for a larger and more money to do this on a longer term basis. So this is this is to get us caught up, get us moving ahead for the users that want to come on right now. Without going through an RFP process, we leverage the existing contractor that we have on board now, which is Federal Engineering. But if my estimate is correct, we can't leverage it to that extent for all the users that are going to come on. We need to go through an RFP process and select a new vendor to do that. So there's two elements to it, short-term and long-term.
So you just want to address the short-term one, is redoing this motion to expand the 50,000?
I think it'd be useful to Tom to do that also, but also have a discussion about, do we agree that we want to take on this finance for helping the users come on a short-term and long-term basis? I think that's the first question. Is that what we want to do?
Does the committee recommend we do that?
The committee does recommend that.
From a user group committee perspective, this really comes as a need for us because it's very apparent that the workload that's being put on us, which we have to accept, we also have to understand that with the exception of likely Mr. Dennert, the rest of us don't have the technical expertise to be able to give educated answers. And what we do at the user group committee level to grant access has a monstrous impact on Isicsb. So as we move forward, we need to know that what we're doing is advantageous to the users, advantageous to this board, and as well as the vendor, that we're not overloading, that we're not going outside of the contract. And to be honest, us on the committee, again, with the exception of likely Mr. Dennert, don't have that expertise. So we're desperately in need of this type of guidance.
Okay. More comments? Okay. Would you like to take care of based on the old business under 20C as a motion? I will entertain the motion to redo that previous motion to expand the use of the funds, if that's what your intent is, Mr. Chair.
That is correct. That's why I have this in writing. I do see an error I made in line 59. Let's see, technical criteria necessary to bring new users into. So the A does not belong there. Either the A's got to go away or the S on the users has to go away. So A would be stricken. So the language here shows what the motion I'm making right now then to modify the December 2015 motion that was approved. And so we would take that motion, add this language, and that would broaden the scope under which we could use federal engineering services to support the board and user group near-term, short-term duties.
Okay, so I have a motion to expand the use of the $50,000 using our current vendor, Federal Engineering. Previously was a narrowly scoped timeline, which now is expanding use based on the language you've underlined.
That is correct, Mr. Chair.
Okay. Have a motion for that. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second. Is there any more discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
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 Opposed?
That's all I have, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Okay, motion passed. Okay. Sean, now you're up. FirstNet 101, 201, 301, and 401.
Okay, I know we're a little over on time, so I'll do this a little rapidly, or more succinct, I guess I'd say. FirstNet 101 would be described as the 99 county outreach that we've already performed, so that's what FirstNet 101 is. FirstNet 201 is where we're at now, and making sure that we understand county demand and their understanding of FirstNet, and making sure that they're getting whatever new FirstNet information we have, including stuff about the QPP and anything else regarding that. FirstNet 301 is the government's opt-in, opt-out. So what our state chooses and how we talk about that across the state and what decision comes from that. Whereas 301 and 401 are kind of have a hybrid portion of what our state plan is and then what we receive from FirstNet as far as our state plan and how we work through that plan with the FirstNet deployment. So that's about the most succinct I can be about what 101, 201, and 301 are, and 401. Would you like me to go into the Y schools quickly? Okay. So formerly it was Y schools, as in Wi-Fi schools. Now it's called WISE, and we typically use the term WISE pilot. WISE stands for Wi-Fi Internet for School Emergencies, okay? So we are no longer using the term Y schools. It is now WISE pilot because it is a pilot program. So I want to stress that it's a pilot program with 3 schools. The schools are Norwalk, Marshalltown, and Martinsdale. There is a potential that we're having kind of a, I don't want to call it an opening, but kind of an announcement ceremony for the public on the 25th, in which we're coordinating currently with all 3 towns to be at the Marshalltown School. We would like, we've been reaching out to fire, EMAs, police, and the sheriffs in both counties and in all 3 cities to make sure that they all have an opportunity to come to this and be a part of this and to acknowledge them and taking this step forward with this pilot program. I believe our state's one of the only states even looking at a pilot program like this. And what it is more or less during an emergency event, public safety vehicles can come up to the school and use their Wi-Fi. It is a dedicated, private, secure Wi-Fi connection for public safety folks. That's pretty much the succinct what is going on. We have an FAQ. We have not circulated to everyone yet because we wanted to make sure that the public safety folks in those 3 communities received it first. We thought that that would be the best way to engage them and make sure that, there was no miscommunications from the standpoint of public safety. The next rollout, we will be going with more of the public sector, making sure that the communities in general, while working through the public safety entities in those communities, are spoken with. We've also engaged the sheriffs, the police, the EMAs, the fire chiefs as to would they like to be a part of when we do the outreach, when we go and speak with, whether it's the principal, the superintendent, the mayor, the school board, the city council, whatever. We invited them. We know we're going into their house, into their community, so we've asked them how would they like us to communicate and how much would they like to be a part of the process. So we're really making sure that they know that we want them to be involved and we want to take in their input and how they want us to communicate in their community about this pilot. So that's about the most succinct I can be about that.
Okay. Thank you, sir. Moving on to 21, under new business here, 21C, board responsibilities and for local use of Isicsb. I think that falls into Operations Ted's, I think, comments, and I think we should probably discuss this more next month if we could. I'm going to push that to next month based on what we've heard today. And I'll move right down to public comment. I will open it up to the public if they'd like to approach this. And Rob Coppert, you can go ahead and step up there, sir.
I'm Rob Coppert. I'm the 911 Director for Cass County, and I sit on a couple of the committees for the Isicsb Board. I think everybody knows me. Some of you probably know me a little too much. Ted brought up a very good point, and it was brought up by a PSAP manager of the same thing. He had a sheriff contact him. I had a PSAP manager contact me. Excuse me. I'd like to caution the board. From what I understand, there's maybe perhaps a team of individuals that are going out and talking to boards of supervisors, city councils, other elected officials that oversee police departments, fire departments, sheriff's offices, that sort of thing, bringing them up to date on what the Isix is. And the Isix is a good thing, don't get me wrong, but the Isix isn't here. You've basically laid the keel of a ship, and you've got what I refer to as snake oil salesmen. They're not telling the entire picture, but they're selling first-class tickets on an ocean liner that may end up being, and I don't want to say this is the Isix, but end up maybe the Titanic for some counties. You want 95% mobile coverage from the Isix, but some counties are being told that it's going to be their end-all be-all. This is what I've heard from one PSAP manager. And it's not because we don't know, because it's not here. It might work for a lot of counties. Some counties it might not work really well for. We heard earlier Tim Malott talk about his county. I've looked at my county. If I wanted indoor coverage, I would have to put up 7 towers in my county to get indoor coverage for my deputies. And we've talked and we've looked at 2 vendors, and we're in a neighborhood of $9 to $10 million. I cannot go to my board of supervisors and say that that is something that we can really afford, because we can't. We're a small county. Like 75% of the counties in Iowa, under 25,000 population, are all small counties. But you've got some people out there that are saying this is, and we'll do everything you want it to do. And that's not the case. And I caution you guys, because I don't want to see the Isix fail in any way, shape, or form. Get the thing running before you go out and sell it. And then don't sell it to the elected officials who don't really understand what these radio systems can and can't do. Bring it to the sheriffs, bring it to the police chiefs, bring it to the 911 directors, bring it to the PSAT managers, and let them bring it to their elected officials. Because they're the learned people in their counties who our elected officials look at for communications advice and information. I know more about the communications in Cass County than anybody else does. Well, I guess there's a few probably know as much, but you know, when you have somebody come in and say, hey, here's a Band-Aid that's gonna fix everything, and it's not, could backfire on the Isix and do you guys, and the Isix, more harm than good. So I really caution you, listen to what, I know it's kind of hard to take this to heart, but listen to what Ted has told you. Listen to what I've told you, because this is some of the things that we're hearing out in the field. You may not hear it, but I'm here to kind of relay that information to you. I mean, most of you know me, a lot of you have known me for a long time. I usually ask the hard questions and give you hard answers in return. I don't beat around the bush on a lot of things. Again, be very cautious about pre-selling the system before you get the thing up and running in the counties. Thank you.
Rob, don't move.
Don't move.
Yeah, don't move. Good. I do have some questions for him. Is that appropriate? Thank you, sir. I find what you're saying, I'm gonna use the word interesting, that may not even be the right word. I guess when those type of conversations are happening, and I'm trying to figure out how to do this without burning a bridge. In the instance you're talking about, was that meeting convened at the request of the Board of Supervisors or whomever it was?
I don't know. I can't speak to it. I was just told by a PSAP manager that they had found out from one of their boards of supervisors that they had been contacted by somebody who was promoting the Isics. I don't know if it was at a board of
Let me ask
supervisors.
the question, was it somebody on this board?
I don't believe so. I don't think so.
All right, so then who was it?
I don't know. But
Okay, this is not an indictment of you.
I can certainly find out and let you know.
Yes, please, let us know, because the problem we get into with this type of thing is that whoever this individual was or group that was out there purporting what it could do or could not do, it becomes a bit vexing for us, because it's not necessarily something that the board or an agent of the board undertook and did, but as it makes its way through the vine, it becomes attributed to the board that it's something that the board is doing, and that becomes a very dangerous position for the board to be in. And so as you counsel the board and say, please be cautious about that, wholeheartedly agree. However, I would counter and say that as a local, you need to be cautious about who you're talking to as well.
Oh, absolutely.
And I think that, as strongly as you voiced that here, that has to be voiced back down into the local.
Well, there's also other things, John, that are being said out there. I've had an adjoining county to me that said, well, we're going to end up having to go on the system because it's the only way we're going to talk to the state.
Right.
I don't know if the state Department of Public Safety, Tom, if you can tell me if Leah is ever going to go away, if the point-to-point's ever going to leave the state centers. I mean, that's how we talk to the state now.
Right. Yeah, we'll stay. Point to point will stay. We've maintained it for 50 years. We'll maintain it for another 50.
And I figured as such. But there's some of that information that they're not saying that, okay, we're going to have to get onto the Isics if we want to talk to the state. And that's not necessarily true. And that information needs to be brought out there before it does the Isics or the Isics board harm. That's all I'm saying.
Right, and I agree with that, and part of that effort has to come from our end of it in terms of the outreach stuff. So like the FAQ stuff, we need to get that done now. Looking at Sean, we need to get that done now, so you guys can get that out in the wild, and it can blossom out, because it's going to answer all of those very same questions. Right now, if they haven't had access to the webinar, we don't have the FAQ out, so they don't have a black and white in front of them. So in lieu of information, the vacuum fills itself, and that always happens on that. But no, I understand what you're saying. We can fix a lot of that stuff.
Can I address my side of this whole thing? What brought to my attention is I was told by a sheriff who sent a broadcast out to all sheriffs that his chairman of his board, who's a former deputy sheriff, was approached by a member of this board to go ahead and talk about Isics and how, and this is what he was told by his chairman, who's a deputy sheriff, former, that this was the end-all be-all for operations, that you're going to have to hook up to us anyway in order to talk interoperable. It just makes sense that you get on board operationally too. Now, that's the way the sheriff sent that out. That's my point. That's what I'm talking about, bridging this gap between this. I think this is a great thing. I'm just like Rob is on this. So don't take anything I said this thing it's not, because it's a wonderful thing. And I absolutely believe that operationally it probably just makes sense for some. But the problem with it is I don't want to end up, again, you think this is crazy. I'm leaving in a few months and I'm going like, now somebody's going to have to fight these battles and these people are going crazy. There's been a lot of little fires put out. I don't want to end up with that type of problem. So the point is that why would somebody from this board go to a board of supervisors, not talk to the sheriff in the first place? The board of supervisors did not solicit this. That's what they said. And I don't have any reason to disbelieve either one of these two people. And then what happens? Boom, a letter goes out to all the sheriffs and says, the state is going over us behind our back as sheriffs, trying to take over what we're supposed to do, quote unquote. I call them up, so what are you talking about? There's never been that discussion on this board. But you know what? Perception is reality. And that's where my concern is. That's what I'm getting at. So I don't know. It kind of feeds in with Rob saying, I can say for an absolute fact that that's what happened here. Now, if maybe, he whispers my ear and we play, the schoolhouse type of thing and it gets changed by the time it comes out. But that email goes out, and that's where the detrimental problem is. That's what concerns me.
Bob?
What do you have as first-hand information?
That was from the PSAB manager that got it from one of the board of supervisors, and I'll dig up more.
What do you specifically know is first-hand information?
Nothing.
Just for my understanding.
Nothing.
Well, I don't know what I can do with that.
Well, I'll see what I can find out and bring that to your attention.
I'm just saying, it's not useful to report, to take second, third information from us.
Okay.
That's just my point, it's not actionable, and I'm sorry.
I fully understand that, and I agree to a lot of extent if this were a court of law, but this isn't, and I have interest in the Essex, otherwise I wouldn't have anything to do with the committees that I'm on or anything to do with it. I have a lot of interest in it and I want to see it go through. And when I hear of something going on that could potentially damage it, one way or the other, whether I've heard it firsthand or if I know it firsthand knowledge or if it's somebody that told me what happened, I want to bring it to your guys' attention. You know, it's this like Bob, I really, really, when it comes to your opinions and your thoughts and stuff, I really respect them. You're one of the greatest minds I've ever really seriously met, and I'm not blowing smoke, but this isn't a trial, this isn't a court of law. This isn't a trial where opinions don't matter, third party doesn't matter. If I hear a rumor that's out there, I'm gonna bring it to this board's attention. So they can stop that or they can do something about it.
Well, just speaking for me, I don't know if it's useful for me to hear second-hand or third-hand information.
I understand.
It's not actionable, but I don't know what we'd do with it. That's only my opinion. Thank you.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Okay, motion for adjournment? So moved. You wanna get out of here?